Hi, everybody. Today is March 2nd, 2025, and this is today's update of my video journal in my recovery from watching my little brother Paul Kierans, 64 with Down syndrome, be locked away by the British Columbia New Democratic Party government led by David Eby and Attorney General Nikki Sharma. So Paul was locked away for 588 days before he died. They terminated our contract for twice weekly visits between me and Paul. We're the last surviving members of a large family in Greater Vancouver. They terminated our visits when I complained to the RCMP about a fraudulent forged power of attorney that the government created to give Paul the COVID-19 shot on February 6th of 2021. The government appointed my 82-year-old Catholic nun sister 4,000 kilometers away in Ontario as Paul's guardian and substitute decision maker. This woman she left home when Paul was born, has never lived with him, and did not understand his speech and communication. On the other hand, Paul had three sisters in Greater Vancouver who had cared for him on weekends and holidays. I was one of those. One sister died and the other sister moved away to Vancouver Island, so I was the last surviving visitor that Paul had. I grew up with Paul. I'm only 2 years older than him, so I could understand his speech and communication really better than anyone on earth. He had sort of unusual references. He was interested in movies, science fiction, Star Trek, Captain Kirk and Spock. He knew the Star Trek minutiae like nobody. I once referred to one of the characters as Bones, and he said no. It was, I forget the name of the actor, but he knew it. He was also very religious. He was a Catholic. He knew Jesus loves me, the song Jesus loves me. So what happened is, as I said, when I complained to the Burnaby RCMP, I didn't know what they were going to find, but I had complained to the public guardian of British Columbia, and actually the public guardian of British Columbia was directed to investigate the fraudulent forged power of attorney, but they worked out a secret deal with the evil nun. I refer to her as the evil nun because she is. So the public guardian had worked out, I now know through Freedom of Information requests, that the public guardian had worked out a secret side deal with the nun, that if she had returned money that she had taken from Paul's, she had given Paul's entire inheritance to the group home where he was residing. Therefore, he lost all that money, which is on its face a breach of fiduciary duties. So my understanding is the public guardian and trustee worked out a secret side deal with the evil nun that if she returned the money to a bank account for Paul, they would support her application to be his guardian. So, as I said, they terminated our visits for 588 days. We were allowed a 10-minute telephone call once a week on Friday afternoon at 4:30. Paul would beg for me to visit with him. He didn't understand what was going on. He didn't want to go back to the group home. His group home was L'Arche, which has, you can't make this stuff up. L'Arche was founded by two SEX predators, Jean Vanier, a retired naval officer from the Canadian Navy, and Thomas Philippe, a defrocked Catholic priest from France. And people thought they were doing this out of the goodness of their heart for incapable adults. They were founding all these residential care homes for mentally incapable adults, but what they were really doing is preying on the young women who were usually young immigrant women or transitory women that were traveling through Canada. And they would prey on them in very sick, sex, sadistic ways. And that went on for 50 years until Jean Vanier died in 2019. And then 28 women came forward and complained. And L'Arche was allowed to investigate itself. And they wrote a 1,000-page report on how they had, it was a terrible thing that had happened, but they were going to protect the rights of the incapable people, that none of the incapable adults had been preyed upon by Jean Vanier and Thomas Philippe. And I know, I used to be a psychologist working with incapable adults, and I know there is no way to know whether or not the nonverbal incapable adults were or were not preyed upon by Jean Vanier. So they knew, L'Arche and the government knew that I knew this, the backstory of this malfeasance. And so they terminated my visits with Paul so that I couldn't take him to a psychologist to have him tested, and so that I couldn't get a sample of his signature to show that they had forged his signature. Paul was never allowed to visit a lawyer. He was never allowed to consult with a lawyer. The Catholic Church has spent, I estimate, close to $1 million on legal fees for the evil nun. She's got 2 law firms working around the clock for her. I think they do nothing else, or the lawyers do nothing else. It's Charles Gibson in Ottawa and Casey Dean Shaw in Vancouver, and Borden Ladner Gervais. Never, ever employ Borden Ladner Gervais. It's a corrupt, it's a corrupt and, it's a corrupt law firm. So I post these videos as I run out of funds. Oh, and the most important thing to mention is that after my brother died, I believe that he was killed by the nun when she found out that the RCMP contacted me and told me that they had reopened the investigation into the fraudulent and forged power of attorney after Paul had some kind of brain incident. He had a wound on the side of his head that was oozing blood. After he was nonverbal, then the evil nun allowed me to visit him for 10 minutes a day. I mean, when I tell you she's evil, that's just the tip of the iceberg. I just sat in the lobby for 10 or 12 hours a day for the 10 days that he survived after he had the brain bleed. But when on April 21st of 2024, the RCMP contacted me and said they had been ordered by Ottawa to reopen the investigation into the fraudulent and forged power of attorney. And when the nun found out that I knew she was being investigated, she ordered Paul's treating physician to remove his oxygen mask. Paul was struggling to survive what had ever happened to him. Something happened to him on April 13th of 2024, and he was struggling to recover. When I said, "Paul, it's Kathleen," that was the first time I had seen him in 588 days. He grabbed my hand and squeezed it so tight. He didn't let go until they made me leave. And I brought a big coffee table book for him to look at with pictures of movie stars. And he turned the pages perfectly. He sat up, he grabbed the book out of my hands and turned the pages perfectly. But when the nun found out that I knew she was being investigated by the RCMP, Paul had to die, and he had to die quick. He was dead within 24 hours of her finding out that I'd been contacted by the RCMP. He had his oxygen mask removed, and he was sedated to death. So I've been posting these videos to just... it's almost a year now since Paul died. I have never cried once. I'm just not able to cry. All I can do is just keep on posting these videos so that people know what's going on. In Canada, if people are not from Canada, since Justin Trudeau became Prime Minister on October 19th of 2015, he has promoted euthanasia of vulnerable, impoverished, and disabled people. These people do not need to be dying. They do not need to be disabled. They are offered death if they suffer from any kind of discomfort. And all that it takes, it's extrajudicial killing of Canadians. Canada's killed 60,000, more than 60,000 Canadians since Justin Trudeau took power. That's more than 20 per day. 5 out of every 100 deaths in Canada is caused by a doctor or nurse administering a lethal injection. And all that it takes is for any two medical professionals, they don't need to know the patient at all. Any two medical professionals sign a piece of paper, and the victim signs a piece of paper, and they can be killed. And it's not suicide; it's killing. The doctor or nurse injects the patient with a lethal overdose, and 60,000 Canadians have been killed this way. Canada has the highest rate of euthanasia in the world. This is precisely what Hitler did when he was first elected Chancellor of Germany. The very first thing that he did was he killed all of the ill and disabled people in the hospitals and sanatoriums in Germany. 350,000 people by the time World War II had started. By the time World War II had started, there were no sick and disabled people left in Germany. So, and this is when people say Canada is the best country in the world, now that we're faced with the threat of annexation and being made the 51st state by Donald Trump. Really, the first thing that Donald Trump said once he was elected, after November 5th of 2024, was he invited Justin Trudeau to have Canada be the 51st state and for Justin Trudeau to be the governor. And we have put ourselves at risk. Our sovereignty has been put at risk by the moral lapse of the Canadian government in killing our most innocent, vulnerable Canadians extrajudicially this way. I know I used to be a divorce lawyer, and it would take over a year to get a divorce. And every piece of paperwork had to pass the registry staff and be approved by a judge and signed off by a judge. But this killing of innocent, vulnerable Canadians, mostly disabled, including veterans who ask for wheelchair ramps, including prisoners who are depressed, they're killed, they're offered death. And Canadians don't want to know how bad it is. I'm the kind of person that this government would kill in a flash. I'm disabled. I've got a heart condition. I'm impoverished. I'm exactly the kind of person that the Canadian government would kill. And we've exposed ourselves to having our sovereignty attacked the same way that Germany did. Occupied Europe. It was felt that it was legal and the ethical thing to do was to invade occupied Europe because Hitler was killing innocent, vulnerable people extrajudicially, exactly the same way that Canada is doing. So we're not the best country in the world. We have a horrible, horrible prime minister who has suspended Parliament. This is the second time Justin Trudeau has suspended Parliament. And we're just waiting for the decision of the Federal Court of Canada on whether Justin Trudeau suspended our Parliament so that he could, the Liberal Party, for political reasons, for political gain, so that he could appoint Mark Carney as his successor, and then Mark Carney could take over as Prime Minister of Canada. Mark Carney has never been elected to anything in his life. He hasn't been elected dog catcher in Canada. But the point I'm making is Canada has exposed itself to being annexed by the United States and to have our sovereignty attacked this way. because of the way we can't even protect our innocent and vulnerable members of our society, of Canadian society. Yeah, it seems to make so much sense, doesn't it? It's a win-win situation. People are unhappy, they want to die, and the government can save a few bucks of taxpayer money. No, it was never, it was never the moral right thing to do. It hasn't been for 50,000 years since civilization started. They could always kill innocent, vulnerable, and disabled people, but we didn't do it because it destroys the fabric of society and it's immoral. We don't have the right to kill people. Anyways, that's it for today. Thank you for watching if you've taken the time. This is the most, I've seen Pierre Poilievre interviewed by Jordan Peterson. He never asked a question about the euthanasia. I've seen Mark Carney interviewed. I've seen Justin Trudeau interviewed. They never touch on this dark underbelly of Canadian society. And it has made us, as I've said for 3 years, it has made us vulnerable to having our sovereignty attacked and taken from us, just as Germany had its sovereignty attacked and taken from it. So that's it for now. Take care, everybody. I love you all.